have Jude Oseh joining us from Abuja. So we'll be having this conversation with him this morning. He's the founder for YIP Africa, joining us this morning. Mr. Oseh, good morning. Good to have you on Rise and Shine.
Hi, good morning. How you doing?
Very fine, thank you. I hope the FCT is treating you well this morning.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes, it is. Okay.
Okay, so
good to be on your show today.
Thank you so much. We have Francis joining us this morning, so it will be both of us talking to you.
Good morning, Mr. Oseh.
Thank you very much. Good morning.
So it looks like the president does have a plan for the Nigerian youth. His 30-day Confab plan. I'll start by saying, do you think that this is the answer to the primary needs of the over 60% population of young people in Nigeria? How did you receive that particular part of his speech on October 1?
Oh, yeah. I think it's very important that the presidency is considering this initiative, because the truth is, it's been a while, in the history of Nigeria, where a president is deciding to have a conversation with young people across the country. The last confab that was ever heard in Nigeria was during Goodluck Jonathan Ebele's administration.
Okay.
And that hasn't really, some of the recommendations made during that confab hasn't really seen the light of day, because Buhari's administration came in, there was no implementation. First administration, second term, the same thing. Now that this is coming up and the Tinubu's administration is considering for the youth, I think it's important to start having the conversation about the future of Nigeria. And these are the people who are going to take over the mantle, and it's important that these conversations are heard, and it's a welcoming development. Yes.
Okay, so one of the questions that quickly comes up after we have appreciated the fact that this is a good gesture by the president. Now, 30 days and looking at youths cut across the 6 geopolitical zone. What are the modalities for selection going to be? The first scare here will be, will this once again be politicized? What are your thoughts, or what would even be your opinion for a best way to select who represents who across what sectors?
So, usually in governance and stakeholder engagement, there are ways you appoint or select people to engage the government on national issues, especially at this level of conversation. Usually what happens is the delegates are selected based on local governments. For example, we have 774 local governments in Nigeria. We have over 309 plus representatives. We have senators. So these stakeholders and elected officials are going to be given the opportunity to appoint a couple of youth from their constituency.
Okay.
Because at the end of the day, these are their representatives, and they know better who their people are. Aside from those delegates, you have youth groups and leaders around youth communities, and of course, civil society organizations handling or doing anything within the youth thematic area. These groups of stakeholders must come together to have the conversations, and you'll find people speaking from grassroots level. You'll find people speaking from policy level. You'll find people speaking from implementation level. You find different people having different interests and addressing different issues. These are literally going to be the dynamics you find during the confab, if it ever happens.
That's a big question you're throwing. If it ever happens, what do you think is going to stop this from happening? That's a major concern you're throwing up there. Talk about that for a moment.
We have seen different cases where the presidency says some things, and then we hear other news, and then this administration we are learning a lot from it. So we are just hoping that this is possible, and if it's not, okay.
Okay, so let's go back back to 2014 when we had the Confab. We saw Nigeria spend approximately 3.5 billion naira to organize that Confab. and years down the line, we have not seen any implementation. The era of former President Muhammadu Buhari gave the excuse that the recommendations that was made by a collective minds of Nigerians, cuts across the different geopolitical zones and ethnicity and religion, were ethnically biased and did not capture the true aspirations of Nigerians. That was the excuse that was given by the previous administration as to why the government of Nigeria could not even pick it up for implementation. Now, I'm saying that to go to this question. As we said, Nigeria is one country where when politicians want to give excuse, when they want to tear us apart, they bring in ethnic sentiment, they bring in religious sentiment, they bring in tribal sentiment. Of course, they also bring in political affiliation sentiment. What guarantee then do we have that Nigeria would not spend another round of wasted resources to organize the Confab yet again, and then peradventure, the President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's administration is not able to implement it. The next government comes in and says, look, there was an excuse and there are excuses given why we cannot implement it. Another amount of money that could have been used for something else has been wasted already.
I am not going to view it through the lens of wasted resources, okay? So in the development of anything, there's what we call R&D. R&D is research and development. And this research and development costs a lot of resources to get anything right. Sometimes you get it right, some other times you don't. But you have to come back to the drawing board and plan all over again and invest more money to getting it right. So yes, I agree with you. A lot of resources were spent during the past national Confab, and there was nothing to write home about, as it were. But if you look deeply, and these are conversations I may not be able to have on air, there are a lot of other bias undertone that may have influenced the implementation of those recommendations. I'm talking about constitutional review. I'm talking about restructuring of Nigeria. These are sensitive conversations that different regions do not have a green light on to have the conversation, right? So I am going to say it's going to be a continuous effort by all stakeholders in Nigeria, including the youth demographic, to keep on having this conversation. And if it's going to be held at national level, I mean, Nigeria has the money, right, to handle some of these conversations and to bring people to the table to have them. For example, this particular confab is centered around very key thematic areas, and I think it's important I stress it. Education is a sector in Nigeria that I think there is a pandemic in education, right? Our curriculum is in shambles. A lot of our graduates are literally unemployable, right? So there's just so much reform that the education system needs, and we need to have those conversations. Then you have employment. It's a mess currently because there's no job. No job. Different institutions or companies do not even have the ease of doing business environment to employ different expertise, right? Then you have innovation. It's pretty much dead right now. For the youth demographic who are leading the IT sector, they are being considered as criminals. We have a lot of young people who are working from home. The future of work is remote. But because they're working from home and looking good, some people categorize them as criminals. This conversation is what we must have. Any young person you see that is looking good or driving a certain kind of car, police are profiling them as criminals. These conversations must be had. The IG of police must be on the table at the panel session. We need to have the military guys on the table to have these conversations. Then you have the security and social justice. Why will a policeman just decide to kill any young person because they look good? You see, should that happen, what is going to be the fate of the family? What's going to be the fate of the policeman? What's going to be the fate of the entire security architecture? These conversations must be had. I see it as R&D. So as much as the data we can curate from this conversation, it will help us in drafting different policies, different recommendations, and implementation. Hopefully, that we begin to see the changes Nigeria need for the future of young people.
Okay, sorry, just an addition to what you've said. Now, I'm looking at some of the recommendations, even some that were deemed controversial as far as the 2014 Confab is concerned. One of such was that Nigeria should revert to the old national anthem. We have seen President Bola Ahmed Tinubu and the Third National Assembly come on board, and that has been brought to bear. Now, wouldn't it be necessary to first and foremost, as a government, look at the recommendations that were made in 2014 and place it side by side with the reality of things in Nigeria, and then see where we can implement before looking at advancing another confab? Yes, we know it is necessary for us to continue to have this conversation, but research, documentation without implementation doesn't bring any impact to Nigerians.
I agree with the sentiments. I totally agree with the sentiment, but it's important that we look at it with double edges, right? Now, when you look at the former recommendations, it's pretty much very broad, right? It's like holistic. But when you look at this, it's streamlined to a demographic, right? I remember that one of the recommendations from the past National Confab includes Nigeria going back to regional government. Mm-hmm. I, for one, have read the first policy draft, the act that has been drafted on the return to regional government. It's a beautiful document, and it's currently being, I think it's on the table of the president for consideration before the House begins to read, and, before we start having stakeholder engagement and then going through all of that. It's going to take maybe 2, 4, 5 years. But this particular one is important because young people's conversation is being brought to the fore. And I am going to advocate that a lot of stakeholders should support this conference. Because right now, a lot of young people or young businesses or SMEs are currently being considered in the financial sector as high-risk lenders. That is a pandemic. What it means is that young people cannot create jobs if they don't have access to finance. These conversations must be heard. The CBN Credit Guarantee Scheme is not being rolled out to capture SMEs. These conversations need to be heard. You see, so I agree with you, but at the same time, we must give some considerations to especially the youth demographic of Nigeria.
Okay, so something I want to look at is the fact that although there are lots of youth groups in Nigeria that have commended the president's move to actually host this confab, we see the likes of the Nigerian Youth Movement rejecting President Tinubu's youth conference, and now they're asking that he goes ahead to implement that of 2014, the confab reports that were generated from there. Now, that's on the one side. The second, some of the kickbacks we've also seen is the fact that Nigerian youth have been trying to speak through different kinds of platforms. So the likes of the NSAS protest have been listed, the hashtag NBAD governance protest has been listed, and the just recent October 1 Fearless. And they're saying that the youths have been speaking up across all of these protests and all of these years, and their requests, their demands are out there in the open. Do you think that all of these protest activities contributes to the voice of the youth? And does it have a place in this 30-day confab, or it should just be disregarded, as it were, as we push this conversation?
Yeah, so there are always events that builds up to bring up about this intervention the presidency is considering, and NSAS, like you have said, may have influenced and played a certain role. Then you have the NBAD governance protest that just happened. That is another lead towards this entire conversation. Plus the future of the Nigerian youth. You have the situation of the brain drains, right? Where every Nigerian who do not find opportunity in their own country pick up a little document called the Green Passport, and they hop on a plane, and boom, they've emigrated from the country. These are the conversations we must start to have, right? These and too many is what we must continue to have, right? So as much as possible, we need to create an environment for young people to thrive in Nigeria. The opportunities timeline must be increased, right? You have a lot of people who may have planned, after graduation, they're going to live a certain life, but that is not the case in reality, right? So it's important that this national confab literally holds. And yes, different events from the past has built up this conversation and initiated it by the president.
Okay, so something I'm also going to ask in line with this is the last confab we had cost us about 3.5 billion thereabout, and it wasn't 30 days. Now, when you have a 30-day confab, let us still look at the financial implication of having this confab. 30 days is a lot of time to tinker on subjects that may or may not be implemented. Don't you think that we should consider cutting down the number of days? I mean, 30 days is a lot. But like you said, when you bring these people across board, out of the 774 local governments, you're thinking accommodation, you're thinking feeding, you're thinking all kinds of things. Is 30 days necessary for this youth confab?
Yes, I agree with you that 30 days is a lot. But again, we do not have a clear understanding in the approach to which they want to do it. It may be virtual, we do not know that yet. It may be hybrid, we do not know that yet. It may be purely physical, we do not know that yet. And I get it. If you're going to be addressing, having this conversation physically, what it means is that there are a lot of resources that must be put into it. But again, I am of the opinion that really doesn't really matter, because when it comes to research, and a lot of us, by us now I'm talking about Africans, we do not really understand that research costs money. Researching costs money. We are using technology today and speaking through the phone because someone somewhere has spent a lot of money on research. Elon Musk today is spending over $360 billion on interplanetary transportation, and he is doing research year in, year out. And this has not yielded anything before it got to the first success. So what I'm saying is, let us look at this confab as an investment into the future of Nigeria, regardless of whatever it's going to cost us. It's important that this research and recommendations that will be gathered and data that must be gathered will be used to design the future of young people in Nigeria.
All right, so before we wrap up this conversation, we need to have the conversation about the youth that this is created for. What approach, should the youth have for these? Do we even have youth that are willing to have the conversation called Nigeria? We're talking strategies, we're talking innovations across different sectorial needs in the country. What state of mind should an average youth who may be handpicked for this particular confab, how should we approach this? Because, I mean, if we have delegates across local government attending, the rest of us should be active participants of that confab, thanks to the availability of technology. So what tools, what weapons, what questions should we be taking and arming ourselves for the confab whenever they decide to effect it, if they do, like he said?
Amazing question. 2 days ago I was with the Minister of Youth, and we were actually having this conversation, and I was asking them that how do we intend to bring all the youths together and all of this? And their response is that they are still designing a framework that works, and it has to be as inclusive as possible. The good thing about it is you're going to have a mix of literally everyone within the youth demographic. We're talking people with disability, we're talking people who have a history of, police brutality. We're talking people who are business owners. We're talking people who are unemployed. We're talking people who have health issues. We're talking people, very robust demographic or young people who have different issues that must be tailored particularly to them, so that a solution is drafted to address that issue in and of itself.
Will the Nigerian youth...
The technology and tools, we at CAP, for example, the Citizens Application for Political Participation, is also ensuring that through CAP, citizens are able to contribute their own quota using our polling system. Wherein, if you are in Uyu somewhere, you are able to contribute. If you are in Maza somewhere, you're able to contribute. If you're in a blue state in a creek, you're able to contribute.
We'll
see the conversations. There are some other conversations that must be either required a vote by young people across Nigeria. You are able to contribute to say yes or say no, wherever you are. So we're trying to see how we can deploy technology to include everyone to contribute as much as they can. So I agree with you. This is an effort that I believe every Nigerian should applaud and be able to encourage moving forward.
Nigerians in diaspora, Nigerian youth in diaspora, will they have a place in this particular confab?
Yes, you're going to have that as well, because the agency Abike and those, I think, the Nigerians in diaspora commission are also going to be part of this entire planning. It's a robust conversation that must include everyone. And a lot of agencies are going to be drafted into this. So yes, the Nigerians in diaspora will have a say in this entire conversation.
Okay, so I'm going to ask, just before we let you go this morning, we all agree, the Nigerian society, people around the world would always agree that without implementation, whatever policy we come up, whatever recommendations is being made, whatever research that we make does not in any way affect the lives of the people unless it's being implemented. So, in your conversation with the minister, and when we talk about implementation, we're looking at time frames. Are there already conversations and plans as to the time frame for implementation of whatever agreement or whatever recommendations would come out as a result of this confab? Because it is not going to be enough to engage all of the stakeholders in Nigeria. Let's hope, as you've stated this morning, that the selection process will not be based on party lines that we have seen in Nigeria, which is seemingly is becoming like the trend. That is going to be neutral, it's going to be free, it's going to be fair and all inclusive. What is the time frame that has been talked about for implementation, or for the federal government to even begin implementation?
So first off, it's important to know that they are not going to be picking just random people on the streets to represent the youth demographic to have this conversation. If for anything, I believe that the Nigerian political system has a framework, and whenever you're going to be having conversations like this, they follow through that entire framework. But when it comes to implementation, it's important that Nigerians know that because we say that, we want to create jobs, that it will just happen out of the blue. No. Once you have a policy document, that policy document, some of which, for example, in this case, job creation. One, it must be funded. Two, it must have a holistic renegotiation of different international corporations or local corporations. If we intend to have more FDIs, foreign direct investment into Nigeria, to accommodate the number of job creation that has been envisaged, what that means is that we need to start reviewing our bilateral agreements. We need to start attracting new investments. These are a lot of work. It may take another 6 months, 1 year. So it's important that we know that while interventions and recommendations are good, its implementation will take time. But until we have the data to work with, we won't be able to do anything. And this is the first point, which is the conversation, the national conference. This is the first stage. Once the next stage comes, just like that. We keep on going forward until we implement whatever recommendation has been.
Jude Oseh is the founder at the Innovation Center and YIP Africa. Thank you so much for coming on Rise and Shine this Monday morning. We appreciate you for your time, and we do hope that we can talk more as plans for the Confab progress.